nowadays there's so many singers out there that they don't even write their own music, and so there's always something that feels a little bit phony about it, but when you get somebody that's really writing their own music and getting out there and performing and people are like just loving it, then that's something real, and it just feels more real to me. So
Congratulations on the recent tour that you just finished.
oh, thanks a lot, man. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I know it's super late there, so I really appreciate you doing this. And I know you just came back, so you must be exhausted. So thank you so much for doing this, Andy.
Oh, it's no worries, man. I'm just fine. No problem at all.
Recently, I've been learning guitar. Over the last few years, I would try and memorize like fingerstyle songs. It'll take forever just to memorize one song. But I recently transitioned to just learning chords, singing with chords, and it has been such a game changer. I was like, whoa, like this is so much better than memorizing fingerstyle.
Right. That's cool, man. Whatever works for you, man. Whatever you want to do, there's so many ways to express yourself. So whatever works.
How long have you been in the music industry? I know you're a big guitarist. Tell me and our audience a bit about your story, Andy.
Sure. Well, I started playing guitar when I was 13 years old, and I'm 43 now. So it's been 30 years. And I wanted to play guitar when I was 13. I heard Eric Johnson on the radio, really great instrumental electric guitar player. And I was just blown away by, the sounds I was hearing that you could do with the guitar. And I just thought there was something almost like magical about it. I actually kind of got into instrumental music when I was younger, when I was about 6, 7, 8 years old, actually. And the first cassette that I bought was the soundtrack to Rocky IV. And I really liked the instrumental music on there. And so I just always had this like connection with the power of music and how it could make you feel a certain way by the music. It just seemed strange in a way to me. Like, how can I feel sad when I hear this, or feel like energetic or happy, or just from music? It was really intriguing to me, I guess, to have that. It seemed like there was a special power to it. But I didn't get into playing music till I was 13, and started with electric guitar. Really, I was into that, and made the switch to acoustic guitar a few years later, and discovered guitar players that were doing interesting things with the acoustic, and writing melody and harmony and rhythm all at the same time on one guitar. And I thought that was really cool because you could really express yourself in a deep way personally with just music like that. So that kind of what drew me to that. But I kind of started to go professional in the early 2000s, and I had started writing my own music in my teenage years, my late teens. And then in the early 2000s, I started trying like different guitar competitions and things like that to try to get my name out there. And I did pretty well in a few of those, and was able to do a few shows and some little tours and things. I actually had the opportunity to go to Taiwan in like 2003, and Belgium and Japan a couple of years later. And then it's about 2005, I put videos on YouTube with the record label I was with at that time, and those went viral and really launched my music in a big way to people all over the planet. And excuse me. So that was, I think 2005, late 2005 or 6. And so ever since then, I've just been touring and writing new music and coming up with new projects and things. So yeah, I guess that's when I really went professional, was at that point. I stopped teaching private lessons at the guitar store down the road and all that. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I've noticed you've been on top of like the social media game. Like you caught YouTube really early. You have like a solid following on Instagram. I don't know, are you doing TikTok at the moment? Have you always been just uploading on every new platform?
Actually, man, I'm not that great at it, to be honest. And even the YouTube thing was a bit of a fluke. It wasn't my idea. It was actually the guy, his name's Rob Pullen, that runs Candy Rat Records. He said, hey, there's this new website, YouTube, and let's try putting some videos on there, because the whole genre was pretty niche at the time. But I was a huge fan, and this guy wanted to try to bring the music to more people. So YouTube sounded like a great idea, and that was it was amazing what happened there. So but really since then, I've kind of focused more on touring and trying to come up with new music and new projects with other people and things like that. I haven't really I guess you can't really, I wouldn't call myself like a YouTuber or anything like that. I don't upload a new video every month even. It's just when I have new stuff out, I'll put some new videos up. There's guys that's like their main thing. And so I guess I'm not quite like that, but I definitely had the big break on YouTube early on. I don't have a TikTok yet, but I'm going to start that here soon. I've got a new project, a trio guitar project coming out next year. And so we're going to start pushing on TikTok as well. I'm kind of slow at that stuff these days, I guess.
TikTok is like massive, and I think especially in the music space, so many people have went from like people making music in their mum's bedroom to like killing it just off their songs going viral on TikTok. So you gotta tell me about the process of touring. Like, how do you guys sell tickets? Like, do you have like an email list that you rely on and you can just blast every single tour? Is it all based on social media? Do you run cold traffic advertisements?
Well, I guess I go the traditional route a little bit more. I've got a booking agency that I work with here in the United States that their primary focus, I guess you'd say, is jazz. There's a lot of great jazz artists on there. I'm on there and I kind of do whatever it is I do. Not quite jazz, I guess, but they're the ones that notify all the promoters if I'm coming to an area. Like towards the end of this year, I'm going over to Europe again. And so they've worked with the promoters over there. And then the promoters say, yeah, let's do however many shows. And then they try to, promote the show and sell the tickets and all that. So I pretty much just go and play the guitar. So that's nice. I don't have to worry about all the other legwork. But so I've got a booking agency, and then the promoters do all that. And I've got a manager that's in Nashville, and he helps coordinate all the things too. So
that's super cool. Has it always been that cruisy, Andy, or has there been a lot of ups and downs over the last 20 years where there were times where you're trying to juggle everything yourself and try to scrape together sort of ticket sales? How has the last 20 years been?
Yeah, early on, I would try to arrange maybe short tours that are kind of more regional. Like, I'm from Kansas here in the United States. And so I would go, like, say, over to Colorado and play a few shows there, and then maybe some in Kansas on the way back home. But it was really pretty fortunate, though. I mean, that it wasn't long before that whole YouTube thing happened. So, but I did set up some tours, even with some friends from Canada who would come down, great guitar players, Antoine Dufour, Don Ross, guys like that. And maybe we'd go over to Missouri as well, St. Louis and Kansas City and things like that. And so, yeah, those things, there was always trickier back then. You just do what you can and try to spread the word. Like back then it was MySpace and stuff like that. So this is pretty prehistoric times there on the internet. But fortunately, things picked up and things have been okay. I mean, of course, early on when things were taking off on YouTube, I play much bigger places, but things have stabilized now and pretty much, sell a great amount of tickets wherever I go, and everything's still okay. It's just funny how, I guess, the way that my music hit people at that time, it's almost, 15 years ago or whatever. And, I'll have people come up at the end of the night and say, man, I heard you play guitar when I was 13 years old. And it's just, you changed my life. Maybe want to play guitar, and hearing stuff like that. It's really like why I do this. The whole reason we play music is to try to make a connection with people and bring us all together a bit more.
As an artist, is there like a sort of compounding effect over time as you just keep doing it, more and more people find out about you? Or is it like a one in, one out effect where as people grow older, they drop off and you try to pick up a younger audience, so you're constantly having to find new audiences as audiences mature? Or does it sort of go up?
Yeah, I guess, there was a big rush at the start of my career for sure. And I guess it's a matter of staying in relevant or whatever in front of people's faces, I guess, and the whole social media thing, because there are younger people, like you say, on TikTok. I need to get on there because I'm sure there's a lot of young people that have no idea who I am. But it's been cool because there's those fans that are just diehard, and they'll be there at the next show, and they'll be there. There's people that have seen me 6-7 times. They say, "Oh, I'll see you next time." But it's a special kind of connection with those fans, But yeah, it's just I guess the nature of things these days. There's just everything's changing so quick, and it's like you have to stay in front of people's face as much as you can. So that's a bit funny for me, because I guess I was always kind of introverted. So I feel a bit awkward, like trying to be in people's face all the time. So I don't have as much of the rock star persona, I guess, but I just like to write music and play the guitar.
That's super awesome. Given how like things are always changing, what's your day-to-day like, Annie? Like, are you able to just focus on your music, focus on writing, focus on coming up with new rhythms, and let your team and managers handle everything else? Or are you still a bit into that stuff?
Yeah, I pretty much just work on music, when I can and when I feel inspired, and like I've tried branching out with a few different things lately too. My last release, which came out just a few months ago, it doesn't even have guitar on it. Actually, it's all synthesizers and keyboards, and it's sort of just a instrumental relaxation music, I guess you could say. And so I just wanted to push myself to see if I could come up with some good music that didn't even have a guitar in it. And it's called Pulse is the name of the release. And yeah, I'm really happy with how it turned out, and it felt refreshing, to just kind of put the guitar down and try something different. And then just a couple months ago, I recorded a new trio album with Callum Graham and Trevor Gordon Hall, and they're really excellent fingerstyle guitar players. And so that has been a lot of fun, and we're going to be releasing that album next year and touring all around the world with that. And it's just a lot of fun to be on stage with two of my best friends and just really amazing guitar players, and to play this music that's really, unique and interesting. I guess that's part of this whole fingerstyle thing, why it kind of took off. It's just so different. And, when you kind of put yourself into the music, you can come up with something really unique and original, and it doesn't sound like rock music. It doesn't sound like classical guitar. It doesn't sound like jazz guitar. It doesn't sound like bluegrass. It's just really its own kind of thing. And both Callum and Trevor do that. And so it's a lot of fun to play with them. And I'm really excited about doing that next year, hitting the road with that.
Have you self-taught yourself throughout this whole journey? Like, for example, I've been just like looking at tabs, learning different chords, but like, how do I go from that to like going up and down the sort of neck?
Yeah, I had about a year and a half or so of electric guitar lessons when I started. And, that helped me learn chords and scales and some of my favorite sort of rock songs and things like that. But I always liked to learn by ear as well, even when I was taking lessons. So I just kept going after I stopped taking lessons, just learning by ear and trying to, I would get some transcription books and things too to help me with some really complicated guitar things. But as I got into the acoustic guitar, I couldn't even find sheet music for this kind of music, the fingerstyle guys that I liked. And so I would just try to learn by ear and try to get new techniques and things through that. And so that was mostly how I did it. I never went to school for music or never studied guitar academically in any way. Just always did it on my own.
That's crazy, because I remember like it was like last week I opened up a chord sheet for like a song I wanted to learn how to sing and play, and there was one chord that was just so far apart. I was like, I can't do this. All right, next song. But I think as I stretch and get better, I'll probably come back to that and figure out how to do that long thing, because like I'm stretching it, my fingers are touching every single other string, so it's not, you can't hear it. But I guess it's just like a trial and error, and it's just figuring it out, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think so. I've got pretty small hands, to be honest. And I remember learning some of those types of stretchy chords you're talking about. I was kind of into the Police, and still am. And I remember Andy Summers from the Police, like in tunes like Message in a Bottle, or Every You Take, some of those old Police tunes. He would use these suspended second chords or add 9 chords where you have like a root, a fifth, and a ninth. And so you'd have to kind of stretch out to play it, but yeah, it was like, you got to bring your thumb down and bend your wrist, and it just comes over.
I remember, there was like this chord where I just got creative, where like my bottom finger, I would like, you would use the back of it. Like you wouldn't use the pinky, but use the back of it so you can hit like 2 things. Yeah, like you come up with random things that fit your hand, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think that's a great way to learn too, and make adjustments, whatever works for you. That was when I was learning stuff by ear. Sometimes I would come up with ways to play the song that were different from the original composer, and then you kind of end up with your own arrangement. So I very much believe that there's no rules as far as what you need to do. If you can make something work, then that's good. If it works for you, do it.
Artists have this ability to like listen to songs and just play to it, just freestyle by hearing the song. How do you get to that point? Is it just from hours and hours of playing different chords and it naturally comes in? Or is that a skill that you can practice?
Yeah, that's. I mean, you need to know some theory, I guess, and if you're playing along with somebody or a chord progression, you can get an idea of where they're going to go next. You know, if it's a repeating progression, you'll know, and then the scales that you might use to improvise over that chord progression. And to be honest, I wish I were much better at improvising. I don't think I'm where I would like to be. I think I'm a bit better at composing stuff and putting things together and sort of telling a story that way and painting a picture that way. But at improvising, I can kind of do it, but it's not like my strong suit. But but yeah, it's just, it depends on, you know, the chord progression, and that's pretty much it. If you can tell, you know, where they're going to go next, you'll know, maybe you'll hear something in your head of what you want to play to go over that. But yeah, it's mostly practice and time and you know, learning some of the theory behind it all.
That's awesome. Andy, what's your like tour setup like? Because I know like Ed Sheeran, it's just him on his own with his guitar and a bunch of things lying around. What's your sort of usual sort of setup?
Yeah, well, pretty similar to that, I guess. Actually, I usually tour with maybe 2 or 3 guitars. I have my standard pitch guitar and then my baritone acoustic guitar, it's like a standard guitar but tuned to 4th interval lower, so it goes from B to B instead of E to E. And if I can, I'll take the harp guitar as well. But sometimes that's hard to travel with. So it's usually at least the standard and the baritone. And then from there, I just go into a preamp, which I use a Guitar Solstice is the brand. They don't make those anymore, but I've been using it my whole career, really. And it's just a little 2-channel preamp. So channel 1 will be my standard guitar and channel 2 will be the baritone. And I just have a bit of EQ on there to get the tone where I want it to be and send that to the house PA system. But I also have a reverb. I use the Digitech Polaris reverb. And that's pretty much it. I'm thinking about changing things up, though. Like I said, I've been using that ever since I started and been experimenting a bit with some different sounds, and I might change some of those things up. But other than that, that's everything I take on the road. And I like to keep it kind of direct and like genuine kind of acoustic guitar sound, you know. I don't really use loopers or like delay pedals, or because like delay pedals and loopers, I guess the reason I don't like to use those is you kind of lose control of the music a bit. Once you put down a loop, it's just going to keep going and you can't control the dynamics of the performance anymore, you know. So I don't like that personally for my own, you know, purposes. I guess I just like to be able to control every nuance of what's going on up there. So I tend to not use a looper or delay pedals and things like that. It's just kind of the acoustic guitar and some reverb to give it a bit more ambiance to it. So that's it.
That's nice. As an introvert myself as well, when I go to like concerts, usually I get pretty drained out by the next morning because it's just so high energy. You're sort of really into it. And then you're surrounded by people. So the next day I just need to spend time on my own. So I think that when you're the artist, it's like that, but times 10, because you are giving your energy away to all these people. How do you handle that? How do you manage your energy, especially as an introvert when you're touring?
That's a good question. Well, just last night, actually, I went to a concert with my wife. We went to see a band called The Midnight. They're sort of a retro synthwave 80s kind of sounding band. And I actually really haven't gone to so many concerts in the last several years. Usually I don't get a chance to, but we went. And yeah, I kind of had that feeling too today, like you're talking about, just kind of being in the crowd and then you feel a little drained the next day. But when I'm on stage, I don't know why, but I just, I feel more comfortable up there than I do in a crowd. I don't know what that is. I don't really like to be in a crowd so much, but I feel like I can just be myself up there when I do the guitar thing, and it's okay. Like I don't have to hide anything or have to prove anything. You know, everyone's there to just hear me play the guitar, and I can just go do my thing and it's all okay. So yeah, for some reason that doesn't really bother me being up there. Sometimes it feels more comfortable than a lot of other situations for me.
That's super cool. And I think, yeah, maybe it's like when you're the artist, it's just you're receiving energy from everyone. So it's like, yeah, that's super cool. Like I've heard like that being on stage, it's like the best feeling ever. Is that like usually the highlight of, your year to year sort of writing, getting in the studio, and you're sort of itching to get on the road to tour? Or do you actually enjoy those other parts more than touring?
Yeah, the being on stage is definitely the best part. I think that goes for most people I know that are musicians. It's because that's what we're here for, is to actually play this music for people. And the conceptualizing and stuff and the figuring out the music is kind of interesting and fun. But when you get to be up there on stage and it's that energy, like you said, when we get the energy and then we can give it back and it's a cycle and we all just feel great at the end of the night, then that's what we're supposed to be doing, So yeah, I definitely love being on stage. The unfortunate thing is with touring though, is just the other 90% of it. It's like you're just waiting to go on stage kind of, you do sound check usually like maybe 3 hours before the show. And so after that, you're just kind of sitting around, go play. And the traveling can get tiring after a few weeks, and I usually try to keep my tours about 2 weeks long really, and then come back. I've got a wife and 2 kids, so it's nice to be home, with them as well. So I try to keep the tours 2 or 3 weeks long and then come back home.
That's awesome. Are your children into music as well? Are they learning the guitar?
My older son, he's 11 now. He's into drumming a bit actually. So yeah, it's kind of funny. That's what I wanted to start on when I was about his age, was drums. But my mom rented me a drum kit and I never had any lessons or anything. So it just kind of sat in the garage and I banged around a little bit. Then we took it back to the music store and nothing ever happened with it. But I've always been drawn to rhythm. And I think that probably shows in my guitar playing too, of course. But at the moment, yeah, he's into drumming. And so we'll see if he wants to stick with that. I don't tend to push things on my kids too much. If they want to get into whatever, I just let them try. So he's been into that. My younger son, he's 9. He's talked about wanting to get in the guitar, so we might start doing some lessons with that. So
that's awesome. Talking about rhythm, Andy, how do you come up with like new rhythms? Like it feels like it feels like everything has been done already. Every part of the guitar has been like. How do you come up with new rhythms?
Oh well, I guess the percussive side of playing the guitar is one component, but rhythmically speaking, I mean, you don't even have to hit the guitar to come up with cool riffs. You can play an interesting riff that's has a interesting time signature or, different accents, whatever. So yeah, it's funny, the percussive guitar thing, I had my big hit on YouTube was drifting, I guess you could say. And that's sort of a big percussive, percussion is a big element of that tune. But I really didn't write too many tunes that had a lot of percussion on the guitar body at that point. It was really just that one and maybe my arrangement of Africa from Toto. So I've written a couple other ones since then, but I've always been drawn just to interesting rhythms. Like I've been into progressive rock music, progressive metal with unusual time signatures since I was a teenager. And so it's always been something fascinating to me, how you can feel rhythms differently, polyrhythms, and just the timing, triplets and sextuplets and things. It's all just super fascinating to me. I love to just watch drum videos, on Instagram sometimes just to see what people are doing. But, with my music, though, I just try to balance not only rhythm, but also melody. I think melody's pretty important with music, too. Sometimes, if you become a sort of, you become super focused with an instrument, say the guitar, and you're like, God, there's so much to learn. And I want to become better and better. And you just want to become like the best guitar player. And you keep, trying to advance yourself. And that's kind of the way I was for a lot of years. But at one point when I started to actually write my own music, my brain sort of changed. It was like, well, what's the big deal with being the best guitar player, or what are you actually trying to do with music? So I started to think more about writing and what am I trying to say with the guitar? more than like, oh, I need to keep advancing or be like the best guitar player or whatever, my focus kind of changed. And I just, ever since then, I guess, and this is probably around when my career started to take off, I just wanted to focus on writing, the best music I could. It didn't need to be complicated necessarily. That wasn't even a factor. It was just, what are you saying with music? Are you going to touch somebody with this? Are you being sincere with that? Those things became more important. So I'm not always, to get back to your question, I'm not always pushing myself to, find new techniques necessarily. Or if I hear an idea in my head and I don't know how to do it, then that might turn into a new technique or something, but I'm not pushing myself, I guess, like when I was a teenager to, just constantly trying to be the best out there or something like that. I just want to write the best music I can, I guess. So
that's beautiful. When people say percussion, rhythm, melody, like what are all these different, in my mind, since I'm not that musically educated, it all feels like the same thing, but what would be the nuances between, what do those words mean, I guess?
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's pretty much three components to music: rhythm, harmony, and melody. So rhythm is the timing of the piece, tempo and the time signature, how many beats per measure, those kinds of things. And the melody would be sort of the main voice of the tune, I guess, and what you would hope people might remember about it. So like when a singer is singing a song that they're singing the melody. Or, when in my tunes, I try to have, like, let's say in Rylin, that main sort of voice that you hear leading the tune, that's the melody. Or For My Father, that's got a really strong melodic component to it. And then harmony would be like the chords around everything, the structure that the melody is kind of riding on top of. So, and that can be, you can have a lot of interesting chord changes in your tune that make it compelling. You can go change keys and go minor, or just totally modulate to a different key entirely. So that's harmony. So those are your three components there. And you don't always have to have a strong melody in a tune. I've got some tunes of my own, even that are more sort of textural and ambient, and just kind of more of a vibe or a feeling to it. But a lot of times the melody is what people remember, and that just kind of hits them in a strong way. So I try to come up with some good melodies now and then.
That's so cool. When you say, and how about percussions? What does percussion mean?
Well, percussion would be like hitting the guitar body, or sometimes I'll slap the guitar strings with my thumb on the right hand, things like that, just to add sort of almost a drum sound, all of that would be percussion.
Is there like a really simple, how in all those movies when people play guitar, there's a da-da-da-da-da, like they go up the neck. Is there like some simple cool thing I could learn just to memorize that cool, like da-da-da-da-da-da?
Well, there are some scales that aren't too tricky, Any scales before?
I've learned some scales, like the ones that like I forgot, like C mate, or like those. Yeah, it'll go up and down, and you'll be in roughly the four frets, and you're sort of going up it, down it. I think I remember doing that. Yeah,
so there's some kind of patterns you can memorize as a guitar player, and and there's the easiest, I guess, to start with would be like a minor pentatonic scale. It only has 5 tones, so the major scale and all the standard modes have 7 notes, and then you get the octave on the 8th. So the minor pentatonic and the major pentatonic just have 5 notes, so it's easier to memorize. There's not so many notes, and then you memorize these 5 sort of shapes, and you can go up and down the neck. So I would say check that out. Minor pentatonic, scales, and those are blues and rock music all the time.
That's sick. Last thing I wanted to pick your brain and hear your thoughts on is I wanted to hear about your writing process. So I recently watched a YouTube video about Logic, the rapper, and he was sharing his writing process about how, he would go through his day, whenever cool sort of bars would come into his mind, he'll write it on his notes. And then when he's in the studio, he'll listen to a bunch of beats, find a beat that he really likes, go to his notes, find some different bars I could sort of fit with that beat, and that sort of starts the writing process. And I was like, whoa, like that's super organized, and it was like, wow, that's cool.
Well, I guess for me, it's a bit more chaotic, a bit, maybe you could say. I like to experiment with different tunings on the guitar. That's kind of a big component of what I've done so far on the guitar is using altered tunings. And I got inspired to do that from players, that came before me, Joni Mitchell and Michael Hedges, and a lot of players experimented with altered tunings. And what I kind of like about that, and what's maybe kind of off-putting for a lot of people actually, is you kind of just completely obliterating all of the muscle memory stuff you might have in your hands. Like, let's say, the C chord or the G chord or, E major. If you put your guitar in a different tuning, those chords might not work at all, chord shapes. And so I like the aspect of you're like an explorer all over again, and you have to find what's available on the fretboard all over again. So that, I know that I've got friends, guitar players that, playing standard tuning, and they're just like, what, why in the world are you doing that? It's like you can't even use all the stuff you already know, all the shapes, and it's true. And I think that's honestly maybe why I'm not that great at improvising, because I like to mess around with altered tunings all the time. So I don't always, if I'm in a weird tuning and you say, hey, play a G sharp, and I'm like, oh, okay, here it is. It takes a few seconds. So, but as far as writing music, I like that. And I like to do it in private because, if anybody hears me experimenting around on the guitar in an altered tuning, they're probably like, what is going on there? Until I start to come up with ideas, and then I'll start to hear, melodic ideas or chord progression, and then I'll just start to go from there and like, oh, what kind of melody could I come up with that going on, or what do I have to take something out so I can play a melody at the same time, But what I like about that, like I said, is I kind of am forced to explore. And then I think that helps me just come up with music that's unique too. I come up with chord voicings that haven't been done before, things like that. Or, I'm forced to find a melody that I can play while I'm holding this chord down in this altered tuning. And I've got these two strings ringing out, in harmony, things like that. So that's kind of my usual process, is just start with an altered tuning and see what I can find. But other times, like I said, I have this new release that I put out when I'm on the keyboard. That's more like I'll hear an idea and and that's what's nice about the keyboards. It's like in black and white, you got all your natural keys and then your sharps and flats there, and everything's it's not going to change at all. So it's easier to kind of put some of my ideas that I might hear in my head on the keyboard. And then sometimes I'll transfer that to the guitar. Or like on my Pulse album, I just come up with a new album that's all keyboard.
So Andy, when you change the tuning and then you come up with something just by accident, do you then bring the idea back to a normal tuned guitar, or would you save that tuning setup? And if you do that, does that mean you have a bunch of different songs all on different sort of tuned guitar setups?
Yeah, they're all in different tunings. So I that's one thing I've had to get good at over the years, is tuning the guitar quickly and talking at the same time, telling a story. So yeah, usually in a concert, I might go through 12 to 15, different tunings. I might have 2 or 3 songs that are in the same tuning, or one that's kind of similar tuning, not too far away. And then so I try to make a set list where they're all pretty close together, so I can cut down on the tuning time in between the songs. But yeah, I use all those different tunings just because you end up with different sounds, different chord voicings and all that.
That is insane, because like memorizing 6 strings, the exact sort of tuning for each one, multiply that by 12 different sets, like that's amazing.
Well, it's about the I'm good at, if that makes you feel better. I'm terrible at everything else.
I was watching like the Bohemian Rhapsody Queen movie, and like when they're in the studio, are they just like playing around, just throwing things at the wall, just like they're just playing around, and if something hits, then they jump on it? Is that usually the process?
Yeah, a lot of times it is. Sometimes you get inspired by something and you hear an idea in your head and you can come up on like in one night, that occasionally happens, but a lot of times it's experimenting and just trying to find something that you think sounds good. And when that happens, you can be pretty sure somebody else is going to like that as well. So that's always been my experience, is just trying to find something that feels like something? Does this feel happy or sad, or is it doing anything, or am I just screwing around on the guitar? And sometimes it does feel like, oh, I'm not getting anything today. Sometimes you might be playing around on the guitar for a couple hours and you're just like, man, there's just nothing here today. And you kind of say, well, I guess I'll come back tomorrow and maybe something will happen there. And eventually it does.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I was going to ask, like, do you go through creative burnout? And like, are you really structured with it? Because I know like Pharrell Williams, I think his routine's like he gets to the studio at 9, he finishes at 2, and he does that every single day.
Man. Yeah, I'm not very structured. I'm not that structured, unfortunately. But I think I might be trying to head that way. Over the last a decade or 15 years, even ever since my career kind of took off, it's been such a change, from the way my life was before. And in the early years, I'd be on the road, sometimes for a month and a half at a time. And then you go home for 2 weeks, then you're back out for a month. And so sometimes when I would get home, I would just not even really want to play guitar. And so it's kind of been that way for a while. Sometimes I'll go out on the road and then come back, and it's hard to kind of want to get in the studio. And so, I haven't been regimented enough, I think. So I've been trying to make some changes and get more of a structure. And I've been a little bit inspired with that from my friend Trevor, who I did the Trio album with recently. He's very structured like that. So just making the time to set it aside, say, okay, I'm going to go in at least for a few hours and see if anything happens, And so I'm starting to get that way. But it's been kind of tough. I got to admit, I'll be honest with you. It's sometimes back and I just want to like hang out with my wife and kids, or play a video game, or go hang out with my friends, and forget to make time to see if something new comes up. So
I go through the exact same problem where I grind out like 2 weeks worth of work. I might go to the snow, take 3-4 days off. And I'm thinking, okay, after this, I should come back and I should be fully recharged for another 2 weeks of just like back-to-back work. The complete opposite. I just come back and I'm just like exhausted. I'm like, what? I just came back from a holiday. Why can't I get back into routine? But it's like weird. Like once you lose that momentum, you have to rebuild it. Even if you had a holiday, I go through the same thing and I'm struggling to figure it out.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, sometimes, but I guess I like to meditate too sometimes, and that definitely helps. Just trying to have a clear mind and get focused. And there's just so many distractions these days too. With our iPhones and stuff. It's good to kind of turn those off and try to get focused. Last
thing, you mentioned the Trio album. Tell me a bit about that. Has that been your first sort of joint sort of album? So, what's your thoughts on collaborations, joint albums? How was the experience?
Right. Well, I've done a few collaboration things in the past. And one of the first ones I did that was really cool for me was doing an album with Don Ross, Canadian guitar player who's a big influence for me. And I think it was 2008, we did an album together. And that was fantastic, getting to do an album with a big influence. It was just great. And another thing early on too was I was on a Christmas album with Josh Groban. They had an album called Noel, and he wanted me for their tune Little Drummer Boy. So I did a sort of percussive guitar part for that. And then I did a tour with Prince actually in Australia. We did 9 shows over there. Yeah. This is 2012. We did 3 shows in Sydney, 3 in Melbourne, and 3 in Brisbane. And, it was just unbelievable. I didn't ever expect something like that to happen. He saw me on YouTube, like pretty much anyone else that's aware of me, and liked what I was doing. And so he invited me to Paisley Park up in Minneapolis, and we jammed around a bit. And that was a pretty crazy year for me. I also was on tour with Dream Theater, and we did some shows in Asia that year. I was opening for Dream Theater on that. And he'd set it up so that like when I was done in Asia, I came right down to Australia. I think it was like May of 2012. And, I was sort of in the band like for a medley of tunes, about 4 or 5 tunes. And then he had me open the show as well. And it was just crazy. I'd never thought that would happen at all. And was really honored that he liked what I did on the guitar, and but at the end of the tour, I kind of felt awkward about it all. I really like to write my own stuff, and I didn't know how to exactly say, like, hey man, if you ever want to do, and I thought this would be cool. If you ever wanted to do like an acoustic album, like arrangements of his old tunes, just like he and I do something. I said, let me know. But I never thought I'd hear from him again after the tour. But it was like 4 months before he passed away. I got an email about doing that album, but we didn't get to make it in the end, unfortunately. But that was really an amazing experience and a tremendous honor. He was such an amazing musician, crazy. He wrote all that music and he could play all the instruments. He'd go from the drums to the bass to the guitar to the keys and everything on stage. So it was really inspiring to watch. And but yeah, back to the trio thing. It's been I guess it's been coming for a few years. We've been thinking about it. Trevor Gordon Hall and Callum Graham are the two other guitar players. And we've just become like best friends over the last decade or so, 5, 6, 7, 8 years or so, and admired their playing and they like what I do as well. And it's, we would go on tours where I'd have those guys, like maybe I'd have Trevor on a tour and he opened the show, and then we would do 3 or 4 songs at the end of the night together. And then I'd go out with Callum, have him open the show, and then we would do, 3 or 4 shows at the end of the night. It was always felt so good to just play with those guys. And it's because we have just similar minds, I think, musically, and our senses of humor are really similar and all that. So it's like, man, why don't we just do this album? And so we went and recorded that a couple months ago. I think it's 12 tracks, and it'll be coming out in the spring. And I'm just so excited to hit the road doing that with those guys. We've had a few chances to play together with the trio since then. And just every time on stage, it just feels so good. And it's so nice because, I've been doing this solo thing for so long now, and it's always fun, but there's something about the energy of playing with other musicians that think like you, and you can tell that we feel music the same way, and it's just so much fun every single time, and I can't wait to just hit the road and do so many shows together and just feel that energy every night.
That's super duper cool. When you sort of see other guitarists, like say John Mayer, or like singers like Ed Sheeran, like how did they get to where they were? Did they just have 1 or 2 songs just went completely viral and then they just kept throwing out bangers? Like what differentiates, like how did those artists become like super global big? What's the difference?
Oh, from like what I do?
I guess from all the artists that sort of tours sort of more locally, they sort of do smaller venues, or like they sort of have more of like a cult following versus the people that are more pop and sort of globally known.
Right. Well, I think in the case of like John Mayer and Ed Sheeran, both, I mean, they're great songwriters, and I think that's probably the main thing. They can both play, John Mayer, unbelievable. And Ed Sheeran's, amazing too. So they're both great, guitar players, but they're just really great songwriters, I think is what it comes down to, and what attracts, and that's, I think that's so cool too, that, because nowadays there's so many singers or, out there that they don't even write their own music, and so there's always something that feels a little bit phony about it, but when you get somebody that's really writing their own music and getting out there and performing, and people are like just loving it, then that's something real, and it just feels more real to me. So I think that's what it is with those guys, great songs. And and I do the instrumental guitar thing, but like I mentioned earlier too, I'm trying to write the best music, the best songs I can. I don't have any lyrics, I guess, so sometimes that's a bit of a barrier for some people that don't feel instrumental music necessarily. It's like, even my brother and sister, they love music with words. They're always wondering, they've been curious about, but that's a bit of a barrier, I guess. But that's okay. It's just I've always been drawn to the instrumental thing, and like I said earlier too, there's just something almost supernatural about the way instrumental music can make you feel without somebody saying words directly that you understand. There's a bit of I don't know what it is, a mystery to it. Just the vibrations that you create when you make music. It's all wavelengths hitting your eardrum, and suddenly you feel totally different. Your mood changes. I love that.
It's like art where it's like a static image. It's not like a moving movie, but you can feel things from a piece of art, and that's similar to like just hearing vibrations.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you're in that same case. I mean, your eyes are picking up the wavelengths of the light and the color, and suddenly you feel something. There's something magic about that. It's as close to magic as we get, I think.
Thank you so much for your time today, Andy. I had a blast just learning. I'm not that musically educated, so I learned so much today just talking to you. I really appreciate your time today.
Hey, man, it was a pleasure for me. You had some great questions and very casual, very cool, man. Appreciate it, Andy.
Thank you. I love how just down to earth, chill you've gone through. It's been a long journey, and you're definitely, this is something you're passionate about. You always want it, like you're the real deal. You're in the dirt doing everything, and I love that about you.
Thanks, man. Well, I hope I can get over there to Australia sometime soon. It's been since I was there with Prince, so hopefully I can come back and do some shows. I played there in Sydney myself solo a couple times, but that was quite a while ago. Hopefully we can get over again sometime.
Most definitely, I'd love to see you in person. Yeah, that is another episode of the podcast. If you guys made it this far, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. Please drop a review on Apple and Spotify. Let me know your thoughts. Give me some feedback so I can improve. And I'll see you guys next week with another episode. Peace.